Hello and welcome to More Tea Minister. My name is Ian. Today we are looking at a white tea. Two things which make it stand out right from the off. First of all, it's from a vendor who we haven't looked at before. This is from Cha Dodo, and it's also a white tea from Burma. We have, over the last few months, tried to find white teas from different countries. We've been to Laos, we've been to Vietnam, we've been to Sri Lanka, we've obviously been to China and to Taiwan as well, and to Nepal. And have we been to India yet? Yes, we have been to at least one region of India, and I think this is the first time we have looked at a tea from Burma at all, let alone a Burmese white tea. So as I say, this is from Cha Dodo. 5 Tree Estate, that's the name of the single estate that the tea is from. It's always nice to get that kind of detail. And it's a very well packed package for 50 grams, which tells us perhaps something about the nature of the leaf inside, what kind of plucking standard, and so on and so forth. So we're going to take a look at the tea in just a moment, and the packaging, because it's the first time we've looked at Cha Dodo. Then we're going to have a Western teapot brew to review the tea, and then a Gongfu session to do likewise. So let's move on to the next part of our video, and I'll see you soon. So here we are looking at the packaging for Tree Spirit White, which, as you can tell from the label itself, is a white tea from the 5 Tree Estate, and it's sold by Cha Dodo. I'm just going to lift this up slightly so you get a proper look at the whole of the sticker, so if it's wobbling slightly. Here we are, standard packaging to the best of my knowledge, but it's a company we haven't looked at yet, and so I thought it was worth our looking at the packaging. So let's move on to take a look at the tea inside. Here we are looking at the Tree Spirit White leaves from 5 Tree Estate. Trying to work out what the plucking standard for this might be. I don't have the details from the website to hand. I honestly don't remember if it specifies a plucking standard, but it looks fairly broad. There's some twiggy material, there are some tea buds, quite definitely, and then there are some, well, fully fledged leaves, some of which are noticeably darker. So if we take a look at something like this leaf here, that's pretty large, but it's a much darker colour. I don't see many signs of direct oxidation. Perhaps we've got some here and down here. That's probably not on the screen, is it? The majority of it, though, is variations on the theme of green, some silvery green right through to something like this, which is a very, very, very dark forest green. So I'm very curious to know what this brings to the table. I'm expecting something with a great deal of flavour and intensity just because of that mixed standard. The smell of the dry leaves is really, really strong. A very delightful, fruity, herbal white tea quality, but it's one of the more intense bouquets, let's use that posh word, that I've come across in a white tea. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing what this is like. So let's move on to our brewing of the tea. See you soon. Hello and welcome back to the next part of our video, where we are going to review our tea, our white tea from Burma, rather excitingly, Tree Spirit White. We're going to review it in a Western/teapot style. So just to explain, the brewing parameters are, I follow the ones from Cha Dodo. It's 80 degrees centigrade, 160 mils of water to 2 to 3 grams of tea. I went for 3 grams. And 45 minutes of steeping. I went for 5. Now that's a relatively long steeping, but it is a low temperature, and the proportions of tea to water are, I would say, well in balance of that. So to take a look at the tea itself, it's a pretty intense colour. That's not a sort of silvery white tea colour, but it's had longer to steep, albeit at a lower temperature. Incidentally, the plucking standard, I did find it on the website. It's a Baimudan white peony plucking standard. It's just that there seem to be so many buds in it. It must have just been an anomalous kind of handful It looked as if it was a literal mix of a Baimudan and a Silver Needles all put together. But just the look of the draw, more Silver Needles in my tea. What a shame. So, colour-wise, a very intense yellow, and that's looking a little reddish. Maybe if I move it there. There you go. It's yellowy orange, actually. As I say, a very intense colour. Scent-wise, I would say it's a lot of characteristics of a white tea. It's very sweet. There is something fruity in there, something floral in there. When it first started brewing, there was a distinct kind of peach element, and it's funny that one of the reviewers on the website, I think it was one of the reviewers, noted a kind of chrysanthemum smell, so a very light but very distinctive floral note. So I'd be curious to know how that manifests itself on the cup. Now, how it's a smell on the cup itself? Much the same, kept the intensity, which is good to know, and the complexity. Oh yes, there's a lot going on there. There's nothing sort of cooked or vegetal about it, which is no surprise at 80. Hasn't been overbrewed. There's no bitterness, nothing tannic or anything like that. No astringency. But there's fruit, there's floral, there's herbal, there's grassy, kind of sweet grassy note, which is very welcome. But there's no sort of duller vegetal notes or anything like that. Yeah, if you had a better palate than mine, and perhaps this could benefit from maybe 85? Maybe 85 and shade down the length of time. Because the flavour's dropping off slightly, and I can't help but feel it would be even more complex, although it's very, very satisfying with that level of complexity. We'll play around with the Gongfu and see how that affects it. But lovely complex flavour, fresh, floral, almost oolong-esque, very fresh, very floral, very fruity. It's herbal, it's grassy, it's very sweet, all very harmonious. There's no bitterness, no astringency, nothing's overcooked, so it's definitely falling in within, I suppose we would call it the Goldilocks zone. It's not too hot and it's not too cold, and all the other different parameters for tea. So, very good showing on a Western or teapot style. So let's move on to a Gongfu session for this, make sure I get the name right, Tree Spirit White. Back in a mo. Hello and welcome to the final part of our video, where we are going to have a Gongfu session to review this Burmese white tea. It gave a very good showing for itself in the Western or teapot style review, so I'm very much looking forward to seeing what it brings to the table for a Gongfu. The parameters are slightly warmer water than for the Western. We've gone for what I regard as fairly standard 85 degrees, 3 grams of tea per 50 ml steeping in our smaller but thicker walled gaiwan. Other than that, we've got our broad brimmed strainer so we can speedily decant our transparent jug. Everything's pre-warmed because I've just washed it from a different review, and let's make a start. Those leaves are really, really complex. Even the dry scent is really, really complex. A lot of fruit in there, a lot of grassiness, a lot of herbal quality. So that's that's not filling the gaiwan as much as I thought it would do, which is a good sign. But I think the first steeping is likely to need a bit of a shugal to get the leaves covered. I think we will maybe start looking at 20 and see if we need to get to 25. Oh, that's not bad. I was reading somewhere to become an expert to something. I am not claiming to be an expert in it. Oh, a little bit of fruit. Try again at 25. Might take that to 30. Yeah. 35 actually. We just missed the boat on 30. 35. You need to do something 10,000 times, I believe it was, to become an expert at it. I've hardly done this in the dozens, let alone 10,000 times. I don't think, if it is 10,000, was it 10,000 hours? Something like that. I don't think I've even, although I've been a minister for donkey's years, I don't think that makes me an expert in what I do. Which is rather worrying after 20 years, if, if that's right. Oh dear. On the lid. A lot of sweet, but a complex sweet, not just something undifferentiated. Yeah, that's really interesting. The colour, I would say that's white tea colour for that first steeping. Yeah, there's maybe a touch of yellow, but nothing outlandish. A warming smell, that sounds a little odd. I wonder if it's because it's a complex kind of fruit and sweetness. I think that's what it is. There's no spice. It's not one of these with a kind of spicy medicinal quality to it. In fact, I don't know what cultivar is used in this, and I would very much like to know. Sweet, complex sweetness again. Little thin, unsurprisingly. Herbal, a little bit of grass, a little bit of sweet, a little bit of fruit, but very much falling off there. I'm going to reduce the amount of water I use in that. It's possible I added too much, just try and get the leaves covered. A little bit of, it's got a little bit of creaminess, a little bit of richness to it. That's not a reflection on the leaf. First steeping, with perhaps a touch too much water. No wonder. That's definitely 85. That's okay. I would expect that to happen. So that's not bad at all. Let's reset that. We're going to take this a bit longer with a bit less water, but we might start looking about 30 this time. Right, that's definitely about right. And the good thing is, because they're withered leaves rather than rolled and twisted and so forth, they don't tend to expand a great deal. So we may not have to have one of those things where we add more water just to make sure we're covering the leaves. Little more fruit there. We'll just go to check on that. 40. Bit of sweetness along with the fruit. Let's just do 45. Herbal, sweet and fruit. Maybe a bit of grass rather than a straight up herbal. Okay, what's the colour like? Well, there's a bit more yellow to that. That is now, yes, you can tell that's moved from a straight up silvery white tea colour to something with a bit of, oh, sidewards. That's a lot more intense than I thought. There's a lot of yellow in that. That's a good sign. You can tell, if I turn it sideways, you can see it there. That's more intense than I thought it was. There is a definite kind of creamy richness to it. There's no dairy in it. It's not like a gin swan, but there's a fair bit of richness to that. Oh yes, again a very complex sweet or fruity sweetness or a sweet fruitiness, depending on what you prefer. Yeah, a lot more body to that. I wouldn't want to make it much longer. There's a little bit of drying quality on there. I wonder if we might have to bump up the temperature. Either that or add more tea. Now I think about it, it's possible. No, tell you what, we'll keep that where it was. Let's not mess around with the temperature. I think we're going to have to add even less water because it was relatively high tea to water ratio, relatively speaking. So we're going to work with that. And we'll just make sure that we give it a good shugle. Let's not have it for too long if that's the case. Keep the water lowish. Yep, there we go. 85. We'll keep giving that some good shugles. I think we're playing kind of catch up here. But there's richness, there's sweetness, there's fruitiness. There's no spicy quality, there's no medicinal quality. But it's got body to it and richness. So that's 30 seconds. I think we will take it to 35. No, we'll take it to 40 and call that quits, I think. And 40. So that's slightly less water still. Definitely herbal, definitely sweet. Definitely some fruit there. Almost perfumey, so that's quite an intense fruit to do that. Yep. Grassy and sweet and fruity. Okay. Nice body to it, richness, a perfumey sweetness. Still lingering, there we go. We've got there finally, so it does need considerably less water than I was expecting. That's more like 40 to 3 grams, but there we go. I think for third steeping, we've kind of got there. Fruit, sweetness, richness, something herbal, something perfumey. I wonder if the grassy is to come or the grassy has been and gone. Very intense and very complicated sweetness. I'm not getting grass as such, but herbal, sweet, fruity. It's not drying, so we haven't brewed that for too long. Lingering nicely on the palate. That kind of perfumey aspect is, well, the steam, the heat of it, the heat in my mouth is making that kind of move around. That's really good. Yet another white tea that has a good showing. That grassy note I don't often find, or at least something that you can say, oh, that's definitely grassy, sweet, and vegetal. There's no dull vegetal notes to it. There's also nothing, as I say, on the other end, none of that spice, none of that medicinal quality. But there's loads of body, enough that it's almost creamy. It's not cloying or claggy. It's rich, it's satisfying. Would I say refreshing? No, I think there's enough body for it not to come across as refreshing as such. But I do like that fruit and that sweetness, that complex sweetness. So that's a really interesting showing. And if I can find out what the varietal is, knowing me, I've said, oh, it doesn't taste like Assamica. It probably will be. But it's got a different kind of twist to it. There's plenty of information on Cha Dodo's website about this estate and the social enterprise that's gone into creating the estate and that they are engaged in. I want to say social enterprise rather than the more loaded terminology of social justice, but that's well worth a read. The website will, of course, be in the description box. So I invite you to go and read that. Is it a good showing as a white tea? Yes. The creaminess, sweetness is still on the palate, a very good sign. I'm in the UK, I could get hold of this with no trouble. Maybe you can get Burmese white tea more readily from somewhere else, but if you can, as always, I say this as a matter of courtesy, if you can, go through Cha Dodo. That's distinctive, the grassiness is The sweet herbal, yeah, slightly grassy note, but the fruit is still lingering on the palate. That's really, really a very good showing. Do be careful. You definitely need more leaf than you might think, or less water, depending on your point of view. I was down to about 40 mils in my small guy one for 3 grams of tea. 85 didn't seem to do it any harm. You might try it at the recommended 80 degrees from Cha Dodo, but that seemed to be bringing out a lot of good stuff. So I'm happy with 85. Tastes good, intriguing elements. From my point of view, readily available. Maybe if you're in Burma, maybe Burmese white tea is a lot more easy to get hold of. And just be careful with the amount of the tea to water ratio. Other than that, 3 out of 3, a hearty recommendation. Please, as always, happy steeping and God bless.